Welcome back. Welcome back. I First of all, I would love to say thank you to my new followers. I really appreciate you all, and every single new person is truly welcomed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, I had ended up in pardon me, small wisp of hair. I ended up more or less not reading anymore from Wednesday up because I ended up in a situation where I really couldn't at the moment. Let's adjust this just one notch here so not so much up in the air. There you go. That's a little better for you. Anyway, so we're picking up where we left off last Tuesday. So we're into the reading of chapter 5 of the Oath. Now, just to give a recap, since there's been some good time lapse. So there was an incident where a woman was found on a logging road, and she had blood all over her, and a truck driver found her and took her to the hospital and everything, and come to find out, her and her husband, Cliff Benson, had been camping out on that neighboring hill by that logging road, and she had seen her husband attacked, and she went to protect him, and well, she ended up discovering something that really kind of threw her off. And so she was running away, and her brother-in-law, Steve Benson, comes in and checks up on her, and now he's working with the deputy sheriff on the case, and it has been reported that a bear attacked his brother. He discovered that the upper part of his brother, diagonal from the top of his left shoulder down to his right pelvis, was gone. And so they had calculated that a bear done it, which is the excuse for every attack in this particular town. And they killed the supposed culprit, but there was no evidence. So, but finally, in the 4th chapter, he's gone into the town to ask some questions, and some people really got upset. And he is now visiting somebody in their garage who has the main proprietor of the town, his wife. He kicked her out, and she is now staying in the local mechanic's garage. And Steve Benson and Deputy Tracy Ellis are there now visiting to see what Mrs. Bly has to say. So let's go on ahead and get into the reading of chapter 5, The Oath. I would never raise the subject except out of my deep concern for your future happiness. I agree that James Hyde is a pleasant enough man when other eyes are watching, But it is widely believed that strange secret practices and beliefs run in the Hyde family. I understand that Benjamin Hyde was a secretive man who long indulged in assault, esoteric, esoteric. I am so sorry. Some words I just can't pronounce. But just the same, perhaps satanic practices, and I have no reason to doubt his son James participates in the same. Is 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 let's skip it. You will never hear such things discussed openly in Hyde River, but they are no secret. I hope to travel to San Francisco in the spring. If you can wait until then, I will tell you all I know, and then you can decide whether you will accept his proposal of marriage. From a letter to Beatrice Clemens from her mother, Margaret Clemens, dated December 4th, 1902. Deceased. Margaret Angeline Clemens, 42, died May 18, 1903, while traveling by train to San Francisco to visit her daughter. She is reported to have fallen from the train, but there are conflicting accounts. Obituary in the Oak Springs Register, May 20, 1903. Now, these little things that I read before I get into the chapter, you will find out later in the book what they actually are, but there are many more of these, and they are all different dates of different people who has had different experiences. But like I said, later on in the book, you'll discover just what these are, but they are in here. All right. Chapter 5, Maggie Bly. Tracy moved forward as if approaching a timid deer, her hand outstretched. Maggie, hi, it's Tracy Ellis. Maggie recognized her and took her hand. Tracy. Then her eyes looked past Tracy and Steve in horror. Oh my God, close the door. Levi shut the door, careful not to slam it. The room was stuffy and dark, and no wonder. The windows, even though they had blinds, were boarded up with plywood. If not for the only dimly glowing lamp beside the bed, the room would have been pitch black. The odors of the aging building, its yellowing wallpaper, dust-filled cracks, and seasonal mildew now mingled with the smell of tears, filth, sweat, and something else. Something dead, Steve thought, shuddering slightly. Tracy kept hold of Maggie's hand as she looked toward Steve and spoke gently. Maggie, this is Steve Benson. He's a wildlife biologist, and he's here to investigate what happened up on Rails Peak. Steve tried his best not to appear threatening. He stooped down just a bit so as not to tower over the trembling woman and extended his hand to her. She pulled away from both him and Tracy, her eyes locked on him as if he were a predator. You're Cliff's brother! That threw Steve off balance. Who was this woman? Yeah, that's right. He immediately looked at Tracy, hoping for an explanation. How did you know he's Cliff's brother? Tracy asked quietly. Maggie's hand went to her mouth again, and she cried through her fingers like a child. You're going to hate me. Levi stepped forward and touched her shoulder. Maggie, now, these folks don't hate you, not at all. They hate me. No, they're here to help you. We all are. Nobody can help me. I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm dead. Tracy met Steve's eyes. See what I mean? Her expression said. Steve was seeing and hearing, of course, but not understanding any of this. I'm no good, Maggie whimpered. No, now that's not true, said Levi. You're a precious creation of God. She recoiled at that. No, I'm not. I'm nothing. Levi countered. God loves you, Maggie. No, he hates me. God loves everybody. Harold hates me. He thinks I'm ugly and filthy and dirty. He hates me. Well, you don't have to listen to what Harold says. God doesn't hate you. He's here, Maggie. He wants to help. I'm sure he does, said Tracy, just to bring that topic to a close. But Maggie, we need to ask you some very important questions. Maggie stared at them blankly. Levi offered, talk to them, Maggie. It'll do you good. Maggie calmed a little, wiping her eyes clear. Tracy smiled to reassure her. Some of these questions are going to be difficult, and I'm sorry, but I have to ask them, okay? Maggie didn't react at all. Tracy tried the first question, asking as gently as she could. So, Maggie, you knew Cliff Benson? Yes, she answered directly. You bet I did. Tracy couldn't hide her surprise at such a direct answer. Steve braced himself. He could sense bad news coming. Tracy probed for it. Were you and Cliff? Were you? We were in love, Maggie blurted as if defending herself. Cliff loved me. He said he loved me. He said he'd get me away from Harold. There it was, just that quick, for quicker than Steve could prepare for it, much less believe it. It's okay, Maggie, Levi said. You just get it out in the open. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us. Maggie, Tracy cut in, were you and Cliff having an affair? Maggie showed disgust at the word. It wasn't an affair. It was more than that. It was the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me. Oh no, Steve thought. Not Cliff. How long, Maggie? Tracy asked. How long were you and Cliff seeing each other? A couple months. Until Harold found out? Maggie said nothing. She only nodded. And that's why he kicked you out of the house? Yes. Maggie closed her eyes as if the confessions had exhausted her. And now I'm gonna die. Tracy stroked Maggie's shoulder. You're not going to die, Maggie. We're not going to let anyone hurt you. Maggie opened her eyes again and glared at Tracy as if she had said something stupid. Don't you know what happened to Cliff? Tracy lifted her hands. Maggie, no, we don't know what happened to him. That's what we're trying to figure out. That's why we're here. Maggie sat up on the bed. He got eaten alive. Everybody knows that. Now we don't know that for sure, Tracy said, as if Maggie had said nothing unusual. Maggie looked toward a boarded up window as if something lurked outside. And now it's going to happen to me. This must have something to do with the superstitions Tracy was talking about, Steve thought. And Tracy wasn't kidding. The terror in this woman was so real it chilled his blood as well. Levi consoled her. Excuse me just a moment, please. Yeah, it's good. I was making sure that my ringer was off because sometimes I get a call that interrupts. Don't want none of that. Levi consoled her. It don't have to happen, Maggie. You could get free of that sin right now. And here was Levi's religious quirk, another thing Tracy had warned him about. Levi, Tracy glared at the man to silence him. Then she turned back to the woman. Maggie, do you know? It was a beautiful thing, she repeated defensively. I don't know what I did that was so wrong. Cliff loved me and I loved him, and she looked at Steve. I just wanted to be happy. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I just wanted somebody to love me, that's all. Tracy nodded with understanding. I hear you, Maggie. I hear you. Maggie softened as she saw the kindness in Tracy's eyes. You know how it is. Sure, I do. Tracy took Maggie's hand again. Harold's been pretty rough on you, I know. I've tried to be good to Harold. Mm-hmm. But he's a mean man, Tracy. Yes, he is. And Cliff made me feel good. He treated me like I was somebody, like a lady. Now Maggie looked at Steve. She was trying to make him understand. Cliff was a good man and he treated me right. Trying to be helpful, Steve answered. I'm sure he did. And then felt uncomfortable for saying it. Cliff should have been treating Evelyn right, he thought. I met him at Charlie's, Maggie volunteered. He said he wanted to take pictures of the mining towns, and so I started going with him, showing him around. I liked him right away, and he kept coming back to take more pictures. Sometimes he didn't even take pictures, he just wanted to be with me. Steve didn't know if he could listen to much more of this. Cliff and this woman. It was unthinkable. It was all he could do to hide his shock and disgust as he thought of Evelyn and the boys and what this would do to them. But confession did seem good for Maggie's soul. She was calming down with each new piece of information she shared. Tracy knew it and was determined to draw out more. Maggie, where were you the night Cliff was killed? At home, having a big fight with Harold. And that's the same night he kicked you out? Uh-huh. He found out about Cliff. He was mad. So about what time did he kick you out? I don't know. About 10. Well, that let Harold off the hook, Tracy thought, unless he had had some of his cronies kill Benson, which would be difficult to prove. And that's the last you saw him? Uh-huh. Did you ever meet Evelyn Benson, Cliff's wife? No. So you were never threatened by her. You know what I mean? Maggie shook her head. I never saw Cliff's wife. Did Cliff ever give any indication that his wife knew about you, or was upset about it, or might want to get even if she did find out? Maggie shook her head. Tracy, Cliff's wife didn't kill him. I know. Tracy hesitated, braced herself, and asked, what about Harold? Did Harold say he would kill Cliff? Maggie shook her head. Did he say he would kill you? Her eyes became vacant, and she shook her head in despair. He didn't have to. It's just going to happen, that's all. It's only a matter of time. No, it's not going to happen, said Tracy. We're going to get you out of here right now. It won't help. How do you know? It won't help, Levi agreed. The problem's in Maggie's heart, so it goes with her. It don't matter where you move her. Well, it can't hurt to try now, can it? Levi shook his head in frustration. Tracy, Deputy Alice, she corrected him. Deputy Alice. That'd just be running, and you can't run from this. Maggie has to get out of this town before she gets hurt, Tracy said in a tone that made it in order. Maggie, would you like to come with me? I'll get you a room somewhere safe, somewhere nobody will know about. Maggie looked at Tracy. Maggie's expression was disbelieving. Levi insisted. It's in her heart, Deputy Ellis. Her sins are going to follow her no matter where she goes. Tracy put her finger an inch from Levi's nose and snapped. Shut up! I'm trying to. You're only filling her head with crap, Levi. Now, if I'm going to help Maggie at all, it'll have to be in the real world. You got that? We're not dealing with fantasies here. You think sin is real? You don't think sin is real? She seemed about to slap him, but reined herself in with great effort and tried to sound calm but firm. Levi, under the present circumstances, if anybody gets her killed, it's going to be you and your stories. So please just be quiet, all right? Tracy took a moment just to breathe before addressing Maggie again. Maggie, I'll get you out of the valley for a few days, take you someplace where nobody can find you. Maggie had no answer. I'll come back in a few minutes. If you want to get out of here and come with me, then be ready. Levi, you help her. You understand? He was about to protest. She nailed him with a voice that jolted Steve. You've got another man's wife in your house, Levi, right in your bedroom. I will use that, so help me. Now help Maggie get her things together and have her ready by the time I get back. Is that clear? Levi looked at Maggie and spoke softly. We better do like she says, Maggie. Tracy rose, and following her cue, Steve went with her down the back stairs and outside. Steve was disturbed, brooding, and bewildered all at once. I had no idea. Don't look, Tracy interrupted, but there's a man under that lean-to over there, and I think he's watching us. Steve didn't look as he asked, watching us, you mean spying? Tracy headed for her car, acting casual, her conversational tone covering the gravity of what she was saying. There are people looking for Maggie, trying to keep tabs on her. Guess they'll be keeping an eye on you too, and me. Steve managed a corner of the eye glance. Across a vacant lot and under a rickety lean-to, a thin little man in blue mechanic's coveralls appeared to be working on an old Riley pickup. That's Carl Infelt, said Tracy. He doesn't live there, and that isn't his truck. I don't think he works for Harold Bly, but Harold's the kind of man he'd want to do favors for. It won't be good that we were seen together at Cobb's. Tracy finally caught the little man looking their way and raved, shouting a friendly greeting. Hey, Carl! Carl raved back, but not happily, and then walked away, leaving the Riley sitting there with the hood open. Tracy sighed. Well, they know what we're up to. Steve paused by the patrol car. Who is this Harold Bly anyway? Steve asked. Tracy snickered derisively. He's the local godfather. He owns the mining company and most of the town, and there are some pretty strong superstitions about him and his family. People are afraid of him, and I think he uses that to his advantage. Then she added, and he's not much of a husband, you may have gathered. So you think maybe Harold? Steve, Tracy cautioned, we'll have to talk about this later. Right now, you need to get out of town. I guess you could see there could be more to your brother's death than a bear attack, which means I have quite a bit of work ahead of me. Now listen to me. I mean this. My job's going to be hard enough. I don't need any more skirmishes like we had in Charlie's. But you know what you're saying, that somebody actually did that to Cliff. Steve, I'm not saying anything one way or the other. All I could do is try to find out what really happened and why. And she considered it a moment. No matter how it all turns out, I know it's going to be ugly through and through, and I'm not going to like it. Well, I certainly don't like it. The whole situation is overwhelming. An understatement deserving a trophy, Steve thought. Tracy nodded regretfully. Just take it one step at a time. Go ahead and, I don't know, talk to Marcus again. By all means, talk to Evelyn. Maybe you'll find out something that'll change the whole picture. I really hope you do. But if this is the work of people, he was trying to sort it out. Maggie said Cliff was eaten. Then he shrugged. She was really out of it, though. I guess she means the bear. Levi obviously told her about it. We'll talk about it later, Tracy said. She opened the door of her patrol car, then looked over the roof at him. Steve? Yeah, maybe it was a bear. Steve realized there was no comfort to be found in any possibility. No answer would ever be the right one. No answer would ever bring back his brother. Maybe, he said, and opened the door. Stay out of trouble, she said, and got in her car. They drove away in opposite directions. Evelyn still wasn't all there, Steve thought. She'd seemed so well, so like herself the other day, but today she seemed vague and sketchy in her thinking and conversation. She might have a long road back, Steve thought. I have dreams, she said, lying on her back and staring vacantly at the ceiling. They'd gotten around to that night after talking about anything and everything else. He told her he'd been to Hyde River. They withheld more than he shared. As far as Evelyn knew, the trip to Hyde River had been unfruitful, but had raised some other possibilities Steve was going to look into. Evelyn asked no questions, so Steve let it go. He did not tell her what he had learned about Cliff and Maggie. He didn't know if he ever could. Now, as Evelyn tried to recall something, anything, she began drifting between reality and he didn't know what. I have dreams that keep coming back. Steve stayed close, listening but expecting little. I keep seeing a big black thing coming out of the dark, and I hear it. I feel it thrashing around, and I feel blood splashing all over me. She shivered. Steve asked softly, what about people? Are there any people in your dreams? She continued to stare vacantly and slowly shook her head. No, no people. Only a big black thing. What about your knife? Do you fight back? Do you use your knife? Yes. I stab at it. I just keep stabbing and stabbing. Where is Cliff? Is he in your dreams? Tears came to her eyes as she whispered, no, he's gone. He's gone, and all I see is a shadow where he used to be. The Traveler Motel on Route 16 catered to vacationals traveling south, away from Clark County and Hyde Valley. Tracy knew that few people from Hyde River would ever come this way or notice this place unless they were on vacation. So Tracy had brought Maggie here, not in her patrol car, but in her own Ford Ranger. Maggie had registered under a false name. Now they were in Maggie's room, number 12. Tracy stood by the door in jeans and a light blue work shirt, the incognito civilian. Maggie sat on the bed. So what now? She asked, timid and bewildered. Just sit tight for a few days. Take some walks down by the lake. See a movie. You need to breathe free for a while, and I need to find out what's going on without having to worry about you. Maggie bent just a little and looked out the window at the sky. He might see me. Maggie, come on. This far away? I don't know. I'll be back tomorrow to check on you. They said goodbye, and Tracy drove away. Early that evening, Steve sat in a lawn chair by the little kidney-shaped pool at the Tamarack motel, thinking, making notes, trying to clarify where things stood and not getting very far. All he could think about was Cliff, the kid brother he would never see again. All he could see before his mind's eyes were the memories, some of them so hilarious now. The hot air blimp Cliff tried to make out of laundry bags when he was 14. It flew for maybe 1 minute before it landed on Mr. Sorenson's barn and set it on fire. Cliff spending all his summer earnings on a gutless Chevy with drag slicks and stuck valves. Boy, it looked great, but it couldn't even climb a hill, much less race anybody. Cliff thought it would impress the girls, but it never got out of the driveway. That stupid dock Cliff built out of inner tubes and old pallets. It was his revolutionary design, portable, quickly assembled, quickly torn down, easy to maintain. He was going to get it patented and become a millionaire. You couldn't walk on it. It flipped over the first time they tried. But that was Cliff, always running off half-cocked after some crazy idea and always getting a lecture from his big brother when he got back. They were a pair, the imp and the intellectual, the clown and the straight man, the kid who stayed a kid and the older brother who never got to be one. Cliff was 9 and Steve was 14 when their folks split up and their dad moved out of state. As a result, Steve quickly found himself in the role of the father, skipping his teenage years entirely to look out for his mother and his carefree brother. Cliff almost forced it on him. Whenever he was in trouble, Cliff came to Steve, and Steve was always there for him. But now those days of childhood were long past. Cliff was gone, killed in an unbelievably gruesome way, and Steve was left alone in the confusing, devastating present. He began to shake with emotion and turned away from the motel building so that no one would see the tears streaming down his face. After several minutes, he sat back in the chair, wiped his eyes and nose with a handkerchief, and wondered if perhaps Tracy Ellis was right. Maybe he was too close to the situation to be investigating Cliff's death. With such a load of grief and outrage, it was nearly impossible to be objective and clear-headed, and he demonstrated that to himself and to Tracy Ellis despite his best efforts. But what else could he do? With Cliff's death unexplained and unresolved, and now with foul play being considered, he had to be here. He could do nothing less. He couldn't rest until he had the answers. With a deep breath and a determination to press ahead despite his feelings, he referred to some notes he'd scribbled on the writing pad in his lap. He had discovered long ago that writing things down helped him organize his thoughts, helped him see what was important, and helped him find solutions. He had written down 3 topics: the killing, the greatest riddle, of course. Tracking down and shooting a rogue bear would have been simple. Now he knew less and had more questions than he'd started. And worst of all, he might be expected to trust others to solve the whole thing while all he did was sit at home fretting about it. That just couldn't happen, not as long as... Steve jumped a little. Oh, the motel owner's big tabby cat. That's what it was, letting out a long, low growl. The strange sound that people who didn't know cats were always surprised that they made from the bushes nearby. Steve settled back into his chair, having demonstrated to himself a secondary burden, his shattered nerves. Next topic, the affair. This topic would be broken down into 2 categories. 1, how the affair could suggest a human perpetrator in Cliff's death, unthinkable though that may be. And 2, how in the world Cliff could be so foolish as to get tangled up with that semi-deranged woman in the first place. How he could be so intoxicated that he gave no thought to what his escapade would do to Evelyn and the boys, and to Maggie Blythe's husband. From all appearances, which Cliff should have seen, Hyde River was definitely a bad choice of towns for starting an affair, and Harold Blythe's wife was definitely the wrong woman. Cliff, you sure did it this time. If only I'd known. He was getting upset again, so he went on to the next topic. The myths, the superstitions of Hyde River. Now here was something he knew nothing about, but apparently he'd come close to getting clobbered because of it. If there had been foul play, this would be a factor. Crunch, crunch, a faint sound. Crunch. Steve looked in the direction of the sound and froze in horror at the sight. Under another lawn chair nearby, the big tabby crouched, his face close to the concrete. He was chomping, chewing, licking a large mouse. The lower half of the mouse sat on its haunches, lifeless, rocking to and fro with the cat's jowls. The upper half was gone, snipped off. The lower half ended in a red stump. The bartender at Harvey's restaurant and lounge asked Steve if he had been jogging. Steve only asked for a table in the corner and a stiff drink. He had no recollection of his long run down the road from the motel, and he wasn't entirely sure where he was. He was sweating and breathing hard. He couldn't think. The drink arrived and he gulped it down, the liquor burning his throat. He was still shaking. He couldn't stop. It was dark enough to get away with spreading a little terror without being seen. So this night, 6 huge men, all wearing black hoods to hide their faces, got together to make a few things abundantly clear to young Kyle Figgin. Kyle was bound hand and foot, kicking, squirming, trying in vain to free himself from their iron grip as they carried him like pallbearers, 3 on a side, his body flat out and face down. They rushed along, letting Kyle's head and face take the lead through the tall grass and prickly underbrush until they got to the edge of the river. Kyle was screaming, but his screams were only pitiful squawks through the gag they'd crammed into his mouth. When they reached the river, they didn't slow down, but splashed headlong into the current until the water rose to their knees and Kyle's face. Then they shoved him under and held him there. Moments passed. Kyle started kicking so hard they could barely hang on to him. Okay, said the ringleader, who stood by Kyle's head, and they raised him just enough so he could suck some frantic breaths through his half-clogged nose. The ringleader bent to speak into Kyle's ear. You don't talk to outsiders, Mr. Figgin. Not a word. We just want to make you aware of that. You understand? Kyle didn't have time to grunt, nod, or scream an answer before they dunked him under the water again and held him there only seconds short of his life. When they raised him up again, he was pulling and snorting air through his clogged nose, desperate to stay alive. The ringleader let go of Kyle's arm long enough to untie the gag and yank the rag from Kyle's mouth. Don't scream. Kyle didn't scream. He was too busy breathing and crying, totally repentant. Don't feel too bad about it, son. We've all been here one time or another. Just don't forget, that's all. With a glance from the ringleader, one of the men holding Kyle's feet cut away the ropes with a knife. Then they dropped him face first into the river and let the current carry him along as he struggled to right himself in the shallow water, his arms still bound behind him, his face dipping again and again under the rippling, splashing surface. He was a good distance down the river by the time he finally got his feet under him and could push, kick, and half float his way to the shore. Then he flopped on the smooth rocks and wept like a child, gasping and coughing, glad just to be alive. By the time he'd recovered, he was alone, without tormentors, but also without help. He'd washed up on the opposite side of the river. Somehow he'd have to cross again to get home, and his arms were still tied behind him. It would be a very long night for Kyle Figgin. Night came, and in the vast mountainous regions beyond the city lights, the darkness was thick and absolute, enfolding the forest, blanketing the valleys, reducing the ridges to the faintest of jagged lines against the clouded sky. The air was cool and still as the sounds of night took their turns. The crickets up close and all around, the frogs further in the distance, the coyotes howling and chattering in a far-away other world. Fully dressed, Maggie Bly lay on her bed in the dark, her face illuminated by the cold yellow of the motel's yard light. She was looking out the window and listening. The light gave her a sickly complexion, but her eyes were alert and attentive. Her lips betrayed a faint smile, her first in days. She felt at ease, relaxed. Absently, she scratched at the area directly over her heart while a stain, black and odorous, began to spread in a widening circle, saturating her scooped-necked cotton shirt and blackening her fingers. She rose from the bed and went to the window, her eyes dreamy and her smile broadening. Then she listened as if to sweet music, her head swaying lazily from side to side. The dread, the fear, was leaving her. She couldn't help but giggle. Elmer and Bertha McCoy sat in the darkened living room of their mobile home amid TV trays, beer cans, and cigarette butts, watching the late show, their stony faces lit by the bluish glow of the television. After the late show, as they did every night, they would take turns washing up in the bathroom and then go to bed. This was all in the routine, as was the two dogs out front barking at nothing in particular as they did every night. But something was different. The dog's barking was usually sporadic, background sound that barely registered with the McCoys. But that night the barking was louder, insistent, continuous. It was enough to force Elmer out of the soft couch and to the window. "Hey!" he yelled. "Shut up out there! Knock it off!" But then he thought he heard singing somewhere out in the dark. Grizz yapped again. "Shut up!" Elmer turned to his wife. "Turn down the TV for a second." She pressed the mute button, and Elmer stood at the window, frowning as he tried to hear the strange sound. Even though both dogs kept barking, Elmer could still hear the singing between their barks. A woman's voice far away, barely audible, then ever so gradually getting louder. She must be coming up the road toward their trailer. By now, Bertha was curious. "What is it?" Elmer only motioned her to be quiet. She got up and joined him at the window. She heard it too. "Somebody out there singing this time of night?" When Elmer recognized the voice, he whispered, "It's Maggie Bly." "No, it isn't," Bertha whispered in denial, immediately clinging to his arm. As they stood there, the voice grew louder, moving eerily up the road. "It's her," Elmer whispered. Bertha clung to him tighter, hurting his arm. It was Maggie's voice, all right, a very good voice, but strange and haunting. She was singing a lonesome country tune about a good man loved and lost, and love never coming again. Then from behind the big cottonwood in their front yard, a silhouette emerged. Maggie Bly, strolling along the right center line, easy and carefree, singing her mournful song, her hands clutching her heart. It was happening again. Bertha had never seen it. She had only heard about it. Elmer had seen it once and never wanted to see it again. But now here it was, unfolding before their very eyes, and they stood frozen, their eyes following that silhouette as it moved like an apparition up the road. the song fading like a ghost crying alone in the night. It took only a few moments for Maggie to pass out of sight and for her song to fade. But that was enough. Elmer and Bertha moved away from the window, pulled the shade, extinguished the lights, then dropped to the floor and crawled to their bedroom to hide. Tracy slammed down the phone. She'd heard from a friend in Hyde River, and it was bad news. Where was that phone number? She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and a pair of cutoff jeans, her favorite relax at home clothes. The number had to be in her uniform. She ran to the closet, groped through the shirt pocket, and found the slip of paper with the number of the Traveler Motel. She picked up the phone in her bedroom and dialed the number. After 5 rings, it seemed to take forever, she heard a woman's voice answer. Traveler Motel. Room 12, please. Tracy could hear the hesitation in the woman's voice. Is this is Tracy Ellis, Sarah's friend. Sarah was the false name Maggie had used. She's gone, Miss Ellis. She left hours ago and she hasn't come back yet. Left? Did she say where she was going? No, just walked out. I saw her hitch a ride out front. Did she check out? No, she still has the room. Once again, just to be sure, she's not there. No, I've been here all evening and she hasn't come back. Harold! Oh, Harold! The voice was smooth, sultry. Bly jolted awake, his eyes darting about, his hand moving toward the .38 revolver in the nightstand drawer. The bedroom was dark and quiet. Nothing moved. He relaxed a little and released his held breath. The .38 remained where it was. Man, what a nightmare. That voice sounded like it was right in the house. Harold, came the voice again, ghostly, teasing. Sweetheart. Bly sat up in the bed, making sure he was awake. He scanned the bedroom carefully. The dresser, the chair, his clothes slung over the bedpost. All were vague shadows in the dark. Where was she? Should he answer, or was he still dreaming? He sat still and listened. Okay, Maggie, I'm awake now. Let's hear you talk. She laughed loudly and mockingly. That was Maggie, all right, Harold thought. He untangled his feet from the sheets, got out of bed, and looked down from the second-story window. He caught sight of Maggie's silhouette just below the window, her hair wild and glowing in the light of the moon, her face in shadow. The sight of her made him jump, and she had obviously noticed, for she laughed even more. She'd scared him, and now she was laughing at him. Instantly, his temper flared. He grabbed his pants off the bedpost, and standing at the window, he hurriedly jammed one leg into the pants. So I caught you with your pants down, Harold? Maggie, I'm going to tear you apart. Bly was hopping on one foot. I'll tear you apart, you hear me? Just thought I'd stop and say goodbye, sweetie. She disappeared. He got his pants up to his waist, zippered them, and stuck his head out the window in time to see her moving lazily toward the road. He ran downstairs toward the front door, hitting a table in the dark, cursing. Maggie reached the street out front and looked for any signs of life. All the old houses were dark, the occupants asleep, or at least acting like it. She stooped and grabbed a rock from the road shoulder, then pegged it at the front door of the mining company foreman. Hey, wake up in there! No response. The house stayed dark. She grabbed another rock and bounced it off the front door again. Now the bedroom light came on. You gotta hear this. The miner and his wife, living 2 doors down, must have heard her too, for their front door squeaked open. She could see their faces, one above the other, peering out through the crack. With a not-so-subtle rattling and a crash, Harold Bly burst out the front door, bare-chested and powerful, holding a shotgun in his burly arms. Another light ran on in a neighbor's house just down the street, and he halted at the top of the steps. People were hearing this, seeing it. Maggie had her back to him. She was still busy rousing the neighborhood. Hey, everybody, wake up. I've got an announcement to make. Another light came on next door, then the porch light. Mrs. Comer, a retired school teacher, poked her head out the front door. In a quick change of character, Blythe stashed the gun on the porch and made his way down the stairs, reaching out toward Maggie like a loving husband should, trying to appear calm and collected. He had to get this mad woman inside before she made him look foolish. Now, Maggie, honey, why don't you come inside and let's talk? She turned to face him, a carefree, cocky expression on her face, the strap of her bag over her shoulder, and a slick black stain down the front of her blouse from her heart to her waist. Blythe stopped dead in his tracks. Then he backed up a little. The stain was glistening, growing. He could smell the stench, like that of a dead animal. It was obvious she'd been clawing at it, for her hands were blackened, and she had black smudges where she'd touched her face. Bly mellowed. Then he smiled a gloating smile. Levi, this is Tracy Ellis. Is Maggie there? No, ma'am. Trouble. Levi could sense it in Tracy's voice. He could feel fear twisting his insides. I haven't seen her tonight. I just got a call from somebody in Hyde River. He says he saw her on the road just a few minutes ago. Levi held the phone to his ear and went straight to the front window to survey the road below. Where'd he see her? What part of town? Tracy was flustered. I don't know. He didn't say. He just told me he'd driven by her. Well, which way was she going? Up the road. That was bad. Toward Old Town? You got it. How long ago was that? About 10 minutes. I'm going after her. If you find her, just get her back to your place, all right? And do it quietly. I'm going out the door right now. I'll look for you. Levi slammed down the phone and bounded for the stairway, grabbing his jacket off its hook as he passed. Looking at the black and dripping stain over his wife's heart, Harold Blythe felt a wonderful sense of intoxication. I know I should pause in between these. Power. That's what it was. Real power. Still, he didn't approach Maggie and didn't want her approaching him either. He stood with his arms outstretched to keep her away and spoke gently. Now, Maggie, I think you should just move on. Just keep going. She cocked her head playfully to one side and said too loudly, I showed Cliff your office at the mining company. We made love up there, Harold. You know that? Maggie, now, calm down. He was acutely aware of the neighbors listening. But she threw back her head and jubilantly shouted it to the sky. Cliff Benson was the most wonderful lover I ever had. Gentle and kind, and she looked at Harold. A better man than you ever were, Harold Blythe. This he hadn't planned on, and it wasn't so much what she was saying that started raising his temperature. It was that he couldn't stop her from saying it. We made love under the 5-mile bridge, Maggie announced to the world, and up on Wells Peak. We even got a motel a few times, but that wasn't like doing it outside, you know. Steady, steady, he told himself, keeping his hands by his sides even as they clenched into quivering fists. He wanted to smash in that laughing, mocking face, but her face was streaked with black slime and he dared not touch it. She could tell. Can't touch me, can you, Harold? Well, nobody can. Not anymore. I could do what I want, go where I want, be with whoever I want. It doesn't matter anymore. Not anymore. Harold said it quietly, but his tone was vicious. Maggie, you shut up right now and get out of here. She actually sneered at him. When I'm ready, Harold. When I'm ready. Nobody tells me what to do. I'm free, Harold. He no longer cared how much attention he attracted. He ran up the porch steps for his shotgun, grabbed it, and turned back toward the street. But she was gone. Across the street, the miner and his wife slammed their door shut and extinguished their porch light. Bly went down the front steps slowly, carefully, starting to lose the resolve his anger had triggered. He looked up and down the street. There was no sign of Maggie. She might be hiding, he thought. Perhaps she'd fled. He took one step toward the street and then another, listening, peering into the dark. He noticed Mrs. Cumber duck inside and turn off her lights. The company foreman's door slammed, and the bedroom light went out. Up and down the street, lights winked out, windows closed, doors clicked shut. Darkness and silence returned to the neighborhood. Bly stood there alone on the dark street for a moment, suddenly realizing he should be pleased at his neighbor's behavior. The dark houses, the closed shades, the slamming doors. They really were scared, weren't they? That brought a cunning smile to his face. Sure, he thought. Maybe it was best that the neighbors heard everything. Moment. By tomorrow, the messy little scene they'd witnessed would mean a whole lot more, and they'd all be talking about it. Then the talk would spread, and the whole town would get a strong message, a message they'd never forget. From down the hill came the roar of a vehicle. Now what? Bly asked. Soon headlights appeared around the corner, sweeping across the faces of the old houses. Bly let the shotgun rest innocently at his side as he backed away from the street. The big Dodge caught him in its headlights and rumbled to a halt right beside him. The window was rolled down. Evening, Mr. Bly. Harold's tone was not friendly. Hello, Levi. Levi had spotted the shotgun, of course. Some kind of trouble? No, thought I heard some coyotes. Levi looked up the hill toward the forest beyond the town, then back at Harold. He seemed edgy. I heard your wife was out wandering through town, Mr. Bly. I was wanting to make sure she was okay. Bly smirked at that. So you've lost track of your roommate, is that it? You know I haven't touched her, Mr. Bly, and I've tried to be careful about appearances. Not careful enough. Have you seen her tonight? Has she come by here? No, I haven't seen a thing. Levi gave him a good hard look before saying, Then I'll be on my way. He put the Dodge into gear. Hope you bag a coyote. The truck lurched forward, did a U-turn, and roared back down the hill toward the highway, the night closing in again behind its red taillights. She'd been by her home all right. Levi could read Harold Bly's face like a billboard, and his lies too. She had to be heading for Old Town. Levi drove slowly, scanning both sides of the road, straining to look back into the trees. No sign of her. Either she'd made remarkably good time or she'd taken the old trail along the river instead of the main road. 1 mile north of Hyde River, Levi pulled off at the Old Town turnoff, her dirt road bearing off to the right. The road was now blocked by a huge berm of dirt and debris to keep vehicles out. If Levi ran in there, he'd be trespassing on company land. He had to go in. He nosed the Dodge up against the berm, shut her down, and continued on foot, flashlight in hand, climbing over the dirt pile and back down to the rutted road beyond. He swept his light back and forth across the road as he hurried along, hoping to find footprints, any sign that Maggie had been this way. So far, he saw nothing. She must have taken the trail along the river, he thought. Maybe, just maybe, he could get to Hyde Hall before she did, or before. A gust of wind caused him to halt. He clicked off his light and crouched down, looking skyward. Nothing up there but stars. He kept listening. The wind was blowing in small, intermittent gusts, and in the distance he could hear the gentle, rushing sound of the river. He was getting close. He started walking again, and soon he broke out of the old forest into an open expanse where grass, berry thickets, and diseased, crooked cottonwoods barely survived amid the gutted, sagging remains of old wooden structures. Old Town. There was nothing left now but stone foundations overgrown with brush, teetering walls with no roofs to connect them, fallen piles of weathered lumber that once were homes for miners, prospectors, shopkeepers, and their families. And that was roofs, roofs, roofs. Hillbillies calls them wolves. Roof. Levi stole quietly into the town, trying to recall where everything was. He hadn't been there in a long time. Few people had. On one side, a beam and plank wall with no window was all that was left of the Gold Dust Hotel. Across the rutted and disappearing road, a crumbling foundation outlined where the tavern once stood. Levi vaguely remembered Hyde Hall being near the other end of the town, near the river. This main road should take him there. Was that singing he heard? Or was it the wind moving through this old place, sighing through a thousand cracks and voids? He froze. He listened. A woman's voice, a country tune. Maggie! He shouted, his voice echoing down the street. Maggie Bly! He heard no response but the wind. He ran in the direction of that singing, hoping to hear it again, praying it would continue. Then he heard it again, this time loud, even boisterous. It was definitely Maggie, Levi thought. Maggie! A gust of wind roared through the cottonwoods, and they swayed crazily, clapping their limbs, one against another as leaves torn loose fluttered over the town. Levi crouched and covered his head as twigs and leaves rained from above him. The singing was buried under the sound. Then Levi realized what he was hearing was not the sound of wind. No! It couldn't be what he thought it was. It couldn't be happening again. Panicked, he ran down the road, dodging crooked trees that had taken hold in the dirt street, stepping around trenches carved by years of rain. Then he heard the singing again, and some hope returned. Maggie! Another rush of wind rolled over Old Town like a wave, bending the cottonwoods and rippling the tops of the grass beyond, on its way toward the river. Levi ignored it. He continued running in the direction of Maggie's voice. And then, abruptly, the song ended in the middle of a note. Maggie! Levi recognized Hyde Hall just ahead, now a cracking, overgrown foundation with three walls leaning precariously inward, and no roof, no floor, no front. Levi flashed his light here and there, sweeping through the entire structure as he approached. In the middle of the back wall, a tall stone fireplace and chimney were the only things still vertical. Berry thickets and young willows competed where the floor used to be. Levi noticed that one wall was quivering as if it had been struck. A plank near the top of the wall, loosed over the years, clattered to the ground. He was momentarily distracted by another flashlight beam far up the road. Someone was approaching on the run, but he didn't wait to see who it was. His own beam had caught something. He stepped over the foundation wall and into the remains of Hyde Hall, then waded through the tall grass to the center of the building where his light fell on a large, square stone, its top almost as flat as a table. Just beyond it, he saw Maggie's shoulder bag laying on the ground amid spatters of blood. A few yards from the bag was a running shoe, the laces still tied. Levi sank slowly to his knees beside the bag and the shoe, and his body began to shake with weeping. He heard footsteps hurrying toward him. A beam of light shone on his face, then on the ground, the shoulder bag, the shoe. It was Tracy Ellis. She was too late. "Did you see anybody?" Tracy asked. Levi shook his head. Tracy wasn't in her uniform, but she had her gun in her hand. "Well, come on, help me look and get away from that bag. It's evidence." He wiped his nose with his hand. "There's nobody here." She took only a moment to realize he would be no help and took off without him, shining her flashlight in every direction, searching, scrambling, tripping in the dark. Levi just prayed. He knew Tracy Ellis would be beating around in the bush, combing over the roads and trails through Old Town, and even walking up and down the river for much of the night. He also knew she wouldn't find anything. And it continues to thicken, continues to get more and more intense. Still don't know what it is, but most definitely ain't no bear. As I'd first said when I first started reading this book, I have read this book multiple times, and reading it to you all probably makes about the seventh time that I have read this. To me, it is just a really great thriller, and it's something because every time I read it, there's something else that I see that apparently ran over top of my head when I read it before. So it's almost like I'm reading it anew, but at the same time, I'm not. And I really would love to tell you the full plot, but I don't believe in spoilers. I really don't. And that's the reason why I'm always trying to beat around the bush and not give anything, because I think that just ruins it. So, and an update on my weigh down. I was up 1 pound, but my measurements was down by about a ½ inch on my waist and my hips. So even though the scales didn't necessarily show it, the measurements did. So I am getting better and better at my eating. I'm not eating as big of a portion when I do eat, and the time in between hunger is getting further apart. Now I'm going between 5 to 6 hours. So I'm getting better and better at how well I'm eating, and I am really enjoying how much better I feel for not overindulging and constantly cramming something else down. It's really it's making me feel a lot better physically than I was. So I'm looking to just continue improving, and I'm really wanting for this to become a habit of life, so that not only I lose all the weight and get down to my goal weight of 135, but that also I will continue to eat only when hungry and stop when satisfied, and that there's no overindulgences or eating every half hour to an hour, but that I really do so much better for life until Christ comes. So yeah, just small things, little bits here and there. Anyway, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, thank you to my new followers. I do greatly appreciate you all. And I don't normally read a book on this channel. I really prefer to show off parks and attractions. But currently, more or less, I'm kind of at a standstill for that. And so I'm just trying to kind of fill in the time slots. That way it's not an empty channel. I want it to stay busy. So that's the reason why I'm doing this. Anyway, so tomorrow we will be reading chapter 6. And I hope that you all will join me, because it's only going to keep getting better, y'all. It's only going to keep getting better. And wait till you find out what the true culprit is that's eating people alive. Anyway, I do greatly appreciate you all. Thank you so much. If you're not following yet, I would appreciate it if you would. Please give a thumbs up. And if you have enjoyed the reading, inform others that there's a book reading going on, and see if you could get some people to come in and listen to. And if there's something that you'd like to say about the story or anything, go on ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below. And I will see you tomorrow for the reading of chapter 6. You all have a great and blessed day.